Hi there, and welcome to this lesson. Now, in this lesson, we'll be learning basic arithmetic, and under basic arithmetic, we would be learning proportion. At this point, I'd remind you to set the video to play in 1080p HD, okay, so you can see everything clearly. And as the lesson progresses, if you have any issues at all, please feel free to get in touch, okay? You can do so via the course dashboard, and we would be happy to help. So, yeah, let's jump right into the lesson. So, proportion. What exactly is proportion? Now, proportion, we use just like we've been discussing. We did ratios, we did rates, we've been comparing quantities, and proportion also compares quantities. Now, when a change in one quantity results in a change in another, the two quantities are said to be in proportion. For example, you could have the price of a given quantity of goods. Now, if you have a given quantity of goods, the price, the total price of the given quantity of goods would be um, dependent on the number of goods you have available. So, for example, if you have five oranges would cost 20 naira. If you have 20 oranges, those will cost something different. So the price of the goods depends on the quantity of the goods. So we have two quantities in this case: price and quantity, price and number of goods, and they are related, they are in proportion. Now, you could also have the time taken for a given number of people to finish a job. Okay, so let's say you have 10 workers working on a farm, and you give them a piece of work to complete. If you have 10 of them, let's say they finish it in 2 days. Now, what happens if you employ 20 of them? They would finish it in less time. So you can see that the time taken for the people to complete the job is dependent on the number of people employed. So we have two quantities here. We have time taken and number of people employed, and you can see that the two quantities are dependent on each other. Okay, now if you have an instance where you have two quantities A and B, and an increase in A results in an increase in B, for example, where we had the price of the quantity, the price and quantity of goods. So, for example, as the quantity of goods increases, the more goods you add, the higher the price. Those are said to be in direct proportion. Okay, for example, you can have 5 oranges costing $2. Okay, and what you have, if you had 12 oranges instead, you'd find that these would cost $4.80. Okay, because anytime you increase the number of oranges, the total price of the oranges would increase as well. So these are said to be in direct proportion. Now, another case is one such that when you have two quantities A and B in proportion, an increase in A will result in a decrease in B. And a good example of that is one we talked about a short while ago, is the time taken for a given number of people to finish a job. And what you notice is if you have 5 men to complete a given task, and it takes them 60 days to do so, if you increase that to 12 men, it will actually take them less time. Okay, it will take them 25 days to complete the job. Okay, you just think about it. If you have 5 people working on a job, it will take them a particular time to complete it. If you had more people on the job, it would take them less time. So you can see an increase in the number of people results in an increase in the amount of time required to complete the job. Now these quantities are said to be in inverse proportion. Now, something very important you need to note when you're working with proportion is when you have two quantities A and B in proportion, the unit relative value of A is the quantity of B that corresponds to a unit value of A. When I say unit value of A, I mean one of A. For example, if you're talking about price and quantity of goods, you'll be talking about the price of one good, okay, the price of one item, okay. Or if you're talking about the time taken for a given number of people to finish the job, you'll be talking about how long will it take for one person to finish the job, okay. So when you're talking the relative value, the real unit relative value of A is the quantity of B that corresponds to a unit value of A. So if you had 5 meters of wire costing $40, okay, and the unit relative value in this case would be the cost of 1 meter of wire, okay, and that would be $8. It's very, very important when you're doing proportion, knowing what a unit value, the corresponding value of a unit value of the first quantity, okay. So now that is pretty much all we need to know about proportion, okay, and we'll just go ahead and solve an example. So here we have, if 5 books cost $100, how much would 14 books cost? Okay, so the first thing we want to do here, okay, we have two quantities. We have books, number of books, and we have price. So we have 5 books costing $100, and then we've been asked how much would 14 books cost. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to know what kind of proportion we're dealing with here. So we have 5 books costing $100, we have number of books and price, and like I said before, as the quantity of books increases, the price will increase, which would tell us that we're working with a direct proportion, okay. So that's the first thing you do, you establish what kind of proportion are we working with. Once you have that, the next thing we want to do is you want to find the unit relative value of A, okay. So we know that 5 books cost $100. We want to know how much one book would cost. Very important, one book will cost how much. So the unit relative value, we have 5 books at $100. One book would be 100 divided by 5, that will give us $20. So if we have 5 books costing $100, one book would cost $20. When you're working proportion, it's very important that you continue to check that the information you're working with makes sense, okay. Because some people might go ahead and multiply in this case for some reason. I don't know why some people, but people do that. And basically you have 5 books costing $100, and they end up saying one book would cost 5 times 100 to give you $500. You can't have 5 books costing $100 and one book costing $500. It doesn't make sense. So anytime you work in proportion, it's very important that you continue to check that your information makes sense, okay. So I think we're fine at this point. We have that one book equals $20, okay, and this is why I said the unit relative value is very, very important, because now that we know that one book costs $20, we can go ahead and say 14 books would cost 14 times 20, which will give us our final answer, $280. And that is how you work proportion, okay. First of all, you identify what kind of proportion you're dealing with, okay, and then you go ahead and find the unit relative value, okay. And once you have that, you know how much one quantity corresponds to, one quantity of A, the corresponding value of one quantity of A, and then you can go ahead and solve step 3 and you end up with your final answer. Okay, let's do another example. Now example 2 says, if it took 24 hours for 5 boys to complete a piece of work, how long would it take for 12 boys to complete the same piece of work? Okay, so now we're dealing with hours and boys to complete a piece of work, okay. So we're dealing with the time taken for a given number of people to complete a piece of work, and I think we already identified this as an inverse proportion. But yes, when we're solving this question, the first thing we need to note is what kind of proportion are we dealing with. Okay, so we have 24 hours for 5 boys to complete a piece of work. If we had more boys doing this work, I believe you'd agree with me that they would complete it in less time. So more boys equals less time, and what that means is we have an inverse proportion, because anytime you increase the quantity A, quantity B reduces. So now that we've established that, we can go ahead and solve for the unit relative value of A. Now, something you need to note about finding the unit relative value of A. At the moment, you have 5 boys completing this job in 24 hours. If you had one boy completing this job, how long do you think it would take him? It will obviously take him more time. It will take him a lot more time. Okay, and what I want to, because in the last example, to find the unit relative value, we divided. But when you're working with inverse proportion, you find the unit relative value by multiplying. Okay, so we have one boy in this case as 5 times 24. It will take him a lot more time, 120 hours, to complete the job if you had just one person on the job. Okay, and then once you have 120 hours for one boy, you can go ahead and say 12 boys for 12 boys. So one boy equals 120 hours. 12 boys would be 120 divided by 5, which would give you 10 hours. And that will be your final answer. Now, something you need to note here, like I said, when you work in proportion, it's very important that at every point your values make sense. Okay, don't just look, there are no direct steps. It's best to not follow the direct procedure to solving these questions. Okay, you analyze the question, know what kind of proportion you're dealing with, and then go ahead and solve for your answer. Okay, now when we're dealing direct proportion, we divided then multiplied. Okay, now we're doing inverse proportion, we multiplied then we divided. So it's very important that every point when you're working, your answers make sense. Okay, because you won't go ahead and say one boy would do it in 24 divided by 5, which would be a lot less time, and it doesn't make any sense. Okay, so you'd have 5 times 24, it gives you 120 hours. One boy does it in a lot more time. That makes sense. And then you want to find how long it would take for 12 boys to do it. You have 120 divided by 5, it gives you 10 hours. Okay, so let's do another form of proportion. This example, very interesting one, and this one is compound proportion. Now what this is a mix of both. It has direct proportion and it has inverse proportion. And what you have is, if 120 kilograms of rice can feed a family of 6 for 5 days, okay, how long would 400 kilograms of rice feed a family of 10 for? So let's look at this. Let's try and understand this. So you have 120 kilograms of rice, okay, and let's see, you have feeding a family of 6 for 5 days. Now if I increase the rice, okay, if I increase the amount of rice, it will feed a family of if I increase the rice, it will feed the family of 6 for more days. Okay, if you kept a family of 6 constant and you increase the rice quantity, you will feed the family of 6 for more days. Okay, but what if you decided to reduce, if you kept the amount of rice you have constant and you decided to reduce the number of people in the family, let's say you cut them from 6 to 2, you will notice it will feed the family of 2 for more days. Okay, so in this case you have a very complex situation where you increase one quantity and another quantity increases, and in the same question you have one quantity that you would reduce, which will result in an increase in. So you have a mix of direct and inverse proportion here. And the best way to go about solving these questions, like I said, when you're dealing proportion question, you shouldn't, there really isn't a direct approach. You just need to understand exactly what's going on, and that's what we're going to do now. Okay, so we have, in this case, we have compound proportion. It's a mix of direct and inverse proportion. Okay, and here's how I'm going to go about solving this question. So the first thing I'm going to go for is a unit relative value. Okay, I want to know what quantity would correspond to one of the first quantity. Okay, so I have 120 kilograms of rice feeding 6 people for 5 days. Okay, now that means 6 people equals 120 divided by 5. So they eat 120, 6 people eat 120 kilograms in 5 days. Okay, I want to see how much these people consume daily. So I'll divide 120 by 5 and it'll give me 24 kilograms. Okay, now once I have 24 kilograms, I can go ahead, i.e. they eat 6 people consume 24 kilograms daily. I want to know what one person consumes daily. So I'd say one person consumes 24 divided by 6 and it will give me 4 kilograms daily. Let's go over this again. So the question said that we have 120 kilograms for 6 people for 5 days. Now first, I want to know how much these 6 people consume daily. If they consume 120 kilograms in 5 days, each day they consume 120 divided by 5, 24 kilograms. Okay, so 6 people eat 24 kilograms daily. Now if 6 people are consuming 24 kilograms daily, I can say one person eats 24 divided by 6 equals 4. So one person for one day we have 4 kilograms of rice, and we've just found a relative unit relative value. Okay, it's one person for one day equals 4 kilograms of rice. And now we can go ahead. We were told that we're asked that how long would 400 kg of rice feed a family of 10 for? So we have that one person consumes 4 kilograms daily. Okay, that means 10 people, if you have a family of 10, they will eat 4 times 10, which will be 40 kilograms each day. Okay, so daily. So we've been told that we have 400 kilograms of rice and the family consumes 40 kilograms each day. You can go ahead and say 400 divided by 40, and it will tell you that it will take this family of 10 days to finish 400 kilograms of rice. And that would bring us to the end of this lesson. Okay, very interesting lesson, and it's always important to work with a more practical approach to solving proportion. There is no one method to solving these questions. When you understand what the questions are about, okay, you know what kind of proportion you're dealing with, you found the unit relative value, and from that point on you can go ahead and solve for whatever answer you're asked to solve for. Okay, yeah, bye for now.